Hello and good evening. Welcome to the third Thursday lecture series for the Monroe County Historical Association. My name is Amy Leiser and I am the Executive Director. Now we're going to get started very shortly. I'm very happy to introduce John Layton, but before we get started, I just wanted to let you know that at the bottom of the screen, you will have a menu bar with a Q&A option. This presentation is meant to be have participation from you. We want to have your feedback and your input. So we ask that you type any of your questions and comments into that form. It really helps us really keep track of those comments so we can ask them to John. Now, questions can be asked anytime throughout the presentation, but we will answer them following the program. Now, without any further delay, I'm very happy to welcome tonight's guest speaker, John Layton. And I'm going to stop sharing the screen so he can start working on sharing his screen with you all. Let's see, get John on here. Let's see, start video. Okay. Can you hear us, John? There we go. Nope, can't hear you just yet. There we go. Can you hear me, John?
Yes, I can.
Wonderful, thank you. So John is a native of East Swiftwater, and he received his Bachelor of Science in Commerce Accounting from now Rider University. He served as an officer in the U.S. Army Finance Corps. John was Inspector General at the Department of the Treasury and worked as a special agent in the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the FBI. In 1985, John was nominated by the President and confirmed by the U.S. Senate as the Inspector General for the U.S. Department of Energy. An enthusiast of local history, John is an active member in the community. He's an active member at the Monroe County Historical Association and served as a board member chairing the Strategic Planning Committee. He is currently the Vice President of the Paradise Historical Society. Ladies and gentlemen, I am very pleased to welcome John, who will give us his brand new, first time heard presentation, Monroe County through the camera lens of Wallace Nutting. John, thank you so much for joining us tonight. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Amy. I have Wendy on my mind. She's a neighbor. I don't know why I keep saying that.
That's all right. I answered anything. We're good.
and I thank you to your staff for helping me prepare for this. This is my first endeavor in Zoom, and I have been apprehensive about speaking into a computer screen and with no faces in front of me. So without further explanation, this is a work in progress. I thought I had a bigger project that I could accomplish, and I ended up saying, oh, this will be phase one of a two-phase project. And this phase two will involve community participation in finding the sites that we're going to see tonight and trying to take pictures of them if we can from a vantage point similar to what Wallace Nutting took. That's kind of my objective. So this program is different than I originally envisioned, but I think it'll work. So it's Monroe County through the camera lens of Wallace Nutting. He wrote a book entitled Pennsylvania Beautiful Eastern, because apparently he must have considered writing one about Western Pennsylvania. And it's illustrated by the author with many examples of landscapes and homes in the we have this pictures on the side. Do they stay now, Amy?
We can see your slideshow.
Okay. And it was copyrighted in 1924. That's 96 years ago. How I came upon this book I thought was kind of interesting. Ron and Fern Bloss, who are the owners of Pocono Supply, a masonry supply house, who I visit from time to time, were vacationing, and they went to a flea market and they saw this book and they thought it would be interesting to read. And when I went in the shop, they said, John, you've got to see this book. It's really interesting. And they got excited about it. And a year and a half ago, they lent it to me. I dropped by this past week and told him I haven't forgotten about you, and I'm going to do a program Thursday night on it. And then when I discussed it with Amy, she found the book, I guess, online, and she looked at the dedication page to J. Stockdale Stokes, and she said, well, gee, he's from Stroudsburg. And I hadn't paid any attention to the dedication. So we, both of us have researched it, and it turns out he was a Quaker from the Burlington County area of New Jersey. While he was born in Burlington County, he died in Montgomery County. He was the owner of Stokes and Smith, a manufacturer of food packaging machinery, and he became the president of the Philadelphia Art Museum from 1937 to his death in 47. And interestingly, while I was researching him, his son, John Jr., was born in 1920, and in 1941, his draft registration indicated that he was a Lehigh University student. He subsequently graduated, became an engineer, and had a very interesting life. He left the Quaker religion early in his life and was quite an adventurer. This J. Stockdale Stokes was his grandfather. Interestingly, also, our J. Stockdale Stokes' brother was Joseph Stokes, and he was the medical director. I left the Stokes out of the slide. He was John's brother and the medical director of the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. He also was a Quaker. I'm not sure if he was really the founder or one of the founders, but he's another example of the Quaker influence in the Poconos. And his family had a house at Pocono Manor, which a friend of mine who was in the medical business was researching before his death and intended to write a book about the Stokes in the Poconos. So who was Wallace Nutting? Well, he was well educated. He graduated from high school in Maine, went to Exeter Academy in New Hampshire, Harvard class of 1887, theological seminaries, Whitman College, where he got an honorary doctorate in divinity, and Washington and Jefferson, another honorary doctorate. He never had children. He was married. He began as a congregational minister in several towns, including Minneapolis, Seattle, but he retired at age 43 because of poor health. He suffered from a vague disorder marked by depression, loss of appetite, insomnia, and other symptoms. Might have been around today and had the same symptoms, I don't know. He turned to bicycling as a means of relaxation and improving his health. His retirement from being a minister would have been about 1904, 20 years before he actually wrote this book. Now, he became much more famous for other endeavors besides his preaching. He died in 1941. That's a picture of him. Very distinguished looking gentleman. He was the minister first. Then he became a photographer, and he's famous for his landscape photos of Pennsylvania or in New England. He was an artist, an antiquarian, an author, a lecturer, and a furniture maker. And my wife recalls we've been to auctions where Wallace Nutting paintings were offered for sale. So he had a market. This is an article from the Philadelphia Inquirer from 1989 explaining Wallace Nutting furniture was highly sought after at the time. And that's an example of his work. So his interest in Pennsylvania. This is part of a slide I have used in other presentations about resorts in the Poconos. And why did people come to the Poconos? For pure water, fresh air, homegrown food, and outdoor activities. And these are ads from newspapers. If you love nature, there's no more charming section in which to spend your vacation than Cresco. And it talks about mountain streams, waterfalls, and beautiful drives. That's from 1914. 1929, we have a modernized farmhouse with all improvements, all outside rooms, fresh produce again, home cooking, pure spring water. So the water amenities were a big deal in the Poconos. From the book, the principal charm of the Poconos consists of the water features. There are numerous falls to explore. Buckhill Falls, consisting of a series of successive leaps, and so forth. This is kind of interesting. It's from the book. I won't bore you reading the whole thing, but I think it's interesting. Monroe County, in its upper section, is practically synonymous with the Pocono region. At first, it's disappointing in that the general contour is that of tableland. We are at the greatest elevations without having a sense of fact, and there's a certain bareness here and there, arising, no doubt, from the windswept nature of the location. As soon, however, as one goes a little apart from the nooks and valleys, one discovers a large number of streams, which surprise one at every turn by their varying moods. And the next paragraph begins, the Poconos are the nearest very high land to Philadelphia, and they are a natural resort for those whose time is limited. Now, adding to that, we know that the DL&W Railroad advertised the Poconos and all of these attractions extensively and brought people from New York as well as Philadelphia. But his commenting about Philadelphia highlights the fact that J. Stockdale Stokes of Philadelphia had been very kind to him, and they apparently got along well. And that was a Quaker influence also. I thought it was fascinating when we look at the pictures that will follow, what would they have been taken with? What kind of cameras might have been used? Well, the Kodak Brownie was a 1901 to 1933 camera. The Kodak on the right was a miniature built in 1924. We don't know which camera he used, but my favorite is the Speed Graphic, which was manufactured from 1912 to 1973. And as a young FBI agent, I learned to take photos with a Speed Graphic in the field. And the prints were wonderful for blowing up, but the focusing and knowing what you had taken took days to get the picture back. So here we go into the pictures. And I have in here the page number in the book that the photo has come from for reference purposes. And I think on most of them, I have an image number also. I apparently left that off of this one. And this is an example of where I don't know where the picture was taken. I don't know where the Stroudsburg Brook is, nor what it looks like today. I might say that of all the pictures I have here, I've only visited 3 of the places that are pictured. I've been to Buckhill Falls, Bushkill Falls, and Paradise Falls. And I was at the Buckhill Falls before 1955 and at the Paradise Falls before 1955. And I understand the Paradise Falls has changed. But so I'm as anxious as anybody to see these spots today and what they look like. Yeah, here we have Winona Falls, Upper Winona Falls. And there's a comment on the right of the screen, which is partially covered by some text. I can't read it, but this is Winona Falls from 1924-ish. And he did several pictures of it. One of the oddities about these pictures, I scanned them in with a wand out of the book so I could get the best picture possible. But we've noticed that in some of these, they look like they were action pictures taken at a slow motion. So the fuzziness of the water cascading on the left is actually the time delay of the photography, not that it's a lousy picture. You can see the trees are pretty sharp, the rocks are sharp, but the water's a little diffused. And that is the nature of the camera he was using. And this one is Long Lights at Winona again. I tried to group the Winona Falls, Winona pictures together. And I've never been there. I don't know what it looks like today. And I have no idea where the vantage point might have been where these pictures were taken. But he obviously cherished the water features of the Poconos. And here he has a description. His verbiage in the book is wonderful. A river in haste. And another one of the cascading water at Winona Falls. And I believe this is up on 209 near Bushkill, but I don't know. Now I'm more familiar with Paradise Valley Brook, and it's a very good picture. And almost anywhere along the Paradise you stop, I think you can find a vantage point that kind of looks like this. You have to remember this is 96 years ago. Most of the plateau had been clear cut at one time. And today we have second growth, and this might be some second growth right here. So the pictures are going to look a lot different, I think, today than they did in 1924. Now we get to the Buckhill Falls. And this is another one where I think the motion has blurred the water by the time-lapse nature of the photography of the day. And like I said, it's been prior to 1955, I was there. I don't know what it looks like today. Another beautiful picture. And most of these pictures were taken in the springtime because he talks about the freshet, which is when the ice and snow melt and the streams are really flowing heavily. And so there's a lot of water flow. The Buckhill Bowl, that kind of looks like something I remember seeing. A Pocono Rapid, I don't know where that is, but it's a very pretty picture. All of his pictures are in black and white. He would have had to wait days to get his pictures developed and printed. So he couldn't take 100 shots and pick the best one like we do today with the digital camera. I have talked to some of my friends who are photographers and encouraged them to find these spots. Hopefully some are tuned in tonight and will get energized. I don't know where a Pocono Terrace is or was, but you can see the trees in the back of this definitely look like second growth. They're not very big. And he talks about the windswept nature, and that's always been one of the things on the upper plateau, that the Gouldsboro, Tobyhanna area, that the trees along 380 are very short. Another one, of Poplar Rapids. They don't have the page here, but I do have the image number, which I can find the page in the book from. And this has a spring-like look. It looks like there's buds, blooms on those trees. I don't know where Levis Falls is. I imagine that it was around the Skytop area because I think the stream up there is Levitt Stream, but I don't know where this is. But it looks very interesting. And you see the pile of rubble in the foreground there. So it has had some water moving through there and moving rocks. This one is a rather romantic shot. A lane someplace in the Poconos. It looks like it's a chute for moving cattle through a pasture. And it's also appears to be in bloom. Another picture that kind of evidences spring. Indian Ladder Falls.
Oh my gosh.
I believe this is up by Winona in that same area. And he particularly liked this falls. He thinks it might be the most beautiful falls in Pennsylvania, at least to us, he says. It is pretty. Now, Mildred Hobbs, I did some research a year ago, and I found out quite a bit about Mildred Hobbs. When I went to find it this time, no, I couldn't find Mildred Hobbs again. But she was an accomplished poet, and I'll let you read the poem that she wrote about Indian Ladder Falls.
John, I don't know, can you hear people
Yes.
talk to you?
Well, I can you.
Indian Ladder Falls looks very much like that still. It's at Skytop.
Oh,
It's not open to the public. However, it is way overgrown up above. You have to know the falls pretty well to recognize them. But the name is still Indian Ladder Falls. I think it has been for a long time, and it is a beauty spot that the Skytop's current naturalist, Rick Koval, takes people to see.
well, maybe you can get us some pictures of it today.
I sure can.
Well, there you go. First hit. All right, here's a bridal June. I don't know what that means or where it is, but once again, we have trees in bloom, and it looks like a stone or block construction building in the background. And I might add here that he did a variety of counties in the East, and he focused on Bucks County, Montgomery County, Chester. I think there's some stuff in Philadelphia, but I really remember the Bucks County and Montgomery County, and he focused on the landscapes, not the water features so much. And then he got into the furniture making. It's quite an essay about Eastern Pennsylvania and life in 1924. Pocono blooms. And remember, this again is why people were visiting the Poconos, for the scenery, the water, quiet, getting out of the city where they could smell the horses and the manure and the smog and the smut, and coming up here to enjoy the weather. And he got captured by that sentiment in this book. The Shadowed Ribbon Road. This looks like 447 along the Broadhead to me. I don't know if it is or not. But once again, you see the smaller trees, a few firs or pines of some kind over on the right there. A fence probably to keep the cattle out of the stream. Dirt roads. This looks much like the road leading up to the Stites Tunnel Bridge, which hopefully will be open in the next few days. But I view that, I look at that as that's the setting where that might have been taken along there. This is the Paradise Falls that I mentioned earlier. And this is a 1924 view. And he talks about the water flowing along the ledges and then dropping. And what people have told me that the falls don't look like this today at Paradise Falls. The flood of 55 apparently altered the structure of the falls, and I have not been able to get there to take a picture. Needless to say, I have self-isolated and not been venturing out to take pictures this spring.
I would disagree, John. I visit Paradise Falls regularly, and there are two things that stand out for me. To the right, you see that sort of shallower cascade that goes, right. That exists exactly as it is now, exactly as it's seen here. And it's hard to tell exactly because the water is at, seems to be at full flood here. But the falls look very much like that.
Do they?
Right now, it's a little bit drier than certainly in this photograph, and you can see different. This is not a step waterfall, but there are steps in it, and some of the steps right along the middle of it are exposed right now, and you can.
Apparently, a lot of rocks got moved around though in the 55 flood, according to people that I've spoken to.
That is very likely true, but there was also at the in the trees along the top, which is not visible here, there was a some kind of passageway over the creek above the falls, upstream from.
We may have a picture of that.
Okay, I'll shut up.
we may. But it's not in order. This is, I don't know what water bows are. I guess it's an artsy term for this waterfall. I don't know where it is. He doesn't describe it, but it is quite attractive. And looks like it would be a hike to go up alongside of that. And a Pocono home drive. I don't know where this is, but when I see the name, it brings to mind Drover's Home Road, which is no longer Drover's Home Road. And that was the road that's now called Sterling Road from Mount Pocono to South Sterling. And it originally was called Drover's Home Road because the cattle folks drove their cattle down that road to the freight station in Mount Pocono, and it got named that by local people. And in fact, I have maps that have that name on it, but it suddenly in the maybe 60s, it became Sterling Road. So I don't know if this might be that same road or not. Another tribute to the brides. Have no idea where that is, but I suspect that we could find some sites in Monroe County that would look like that today. Pasture setting, fruit trees, a Pocono pool. I don't know where this is. Notice the lack of mature trees in that picture. We could probably find a pond type setting that looks a lot like that today. And today's pictures would be in color, and we'd have the opportunity to frame them so that they look like this. A double leap. He doesn't describe where it is, which falls it is, but he was romanticizing the flow of the water and how it cascaded over the rocks and spills into a pond below. I envision our fishermen friends would be delighted in fishing that pond at the bottom for trout. And here we have another one of the upper ladder falls. Like I said, I didn't get them all put together neatly, but it's a very pretty fall. And another pond. I can see why Skytop wouldn't want everybody tromping around there. But again, look at the size of the trees. They're young trees. Mountain wealth in the Poconos. This is the bridge I was thinking about on the at the Paradise. I don't know where it is or where it was. It's probably not there today, but it looks like it's a wooden bridge, maybe something that would have been there by Alpine Mountain, coming out of there onto 447. The tumult of waters, Paradise Valley. There's your bridge, Carol, in the background, maybe. And again, that's obviously a spring shot, lots of water tripping through there. And you can see the plant in the water there that looks like it's ready to float away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And like I say, some of that distortion in the picture may have been in the original photograph. Oh, I might add, this book was, as I said, was lent to me by Ron and Fern Bloss a year and a half ago at least. And I've been worried that they think I stole it, but they are very gracious when I talked to them. But I decided I ought to own a copy of the book myself. So I went online and I found that it's been reprinted multiple times by different publishers. And you can buy an edition from these other publishers. But I was able to find, and I thought it would be here today, but it hasn't arrived. I've got a signed first edition by Wallace.
Oh my goodness.
En route. And it has a little the backing, the hinge, whatever you call that on the book, it's supposed to have a little bit of damage to it, but it's intact. And so I thought, well, we'll see what the pictures look like in another edition, if they're as clear as these are or not. But anyway, I thought I better have one if I'm shooting my mouth off about it. And this one is a very, very placid thing, water stairs. It's a series of ledges over which water is flowing, typical of the Poconos, rock ledges everywhere. And new trees, not very old. I think also a spring picture. And here we have spring turbulence. Don't know where it is. He did some photography in the West End. I'm not familiar with the West End streams at all. More familiar with the streams in the eastern part of the county. But you can, I think in that picture, I actually think I see mud. The brownness of the turbulence of the water stirring it up, but I don't know. Maybe it's my imagination. Now here we have the site for a picnic right here, Pine Falls. That looks like a structure in the back, but I don't know what it is. And now we've seen a lot of pictures of waterfalls, ponds, and remember his earlier introduction, place to come from the city to enjoy nature. Water play, another wide stream flowing along nicely. Looks like rhododendron or laurel in the background there. I don't know for sure. Young trees. 96 years later, we have no idea what these places look like. The joy of the year. More blossoming trees. Looks like a split rail fence there underneath of that tree and a pasture to the left. I don't know if it's a road or a lane there in the on the right of the picture. But it kind of looks like the Poconos that I was raised in. An unnamed cascade in the Poconos, which implies he knew the names of some of the others that he, even though he didn't name them, he made a point of saying he didn't know the name of this one. But I can see water tripping down a hillside in the spring looking like that. Now we're coming near the end of my pictures, a crowded brook in the Delaware Water Gap. And I forgot, we have the Cherry Valley, the Cherry Lane, whatever, Cherry Creek that comes in there. I don't know if any of these might be from there or not. There's a structure in the right in this picture also. Now this one's my John Abel picture. You know, John Abel has done research on the murder of Theodore Broadhead and the chasing of the banditos and the bad guys. And as I recall, they went by a barn, an old barn. Well, here's the old shed door in the Delaware Water Gap on the right there. And it just reminded me of John's book on the murder of Theodore Broadhead. And there's a house in the background, a nice pond. And here we have the water joy again. Don't know where it is. I don't know how I would find it. Once again, it looks like a time photography problem where the plants are crisp and the water is diffused. The shutter speeds on those old cameras were fixed. You really couldn't adjust them very well. I don't know if you could at all, I'll tell you the truth. You could get the focal distance, but I don't think speed was an option. And here we have Farmer's Joy. Another lane. You can see the wagon ruts in there, or car ruts, I'm not sure which. Another fence that's kind of falling down, and a nice waterfall over on the right. I have to say, I can't see the text on the right, so I can't help you with that, but I've got text over there.
It says Buckhill.
Oh, did it? I couldn't read it. And this is Canadensis, but he didn't say where. And this looks like the Delaware Water Gap to me. Now, in the book, he talks about he contrasts the Delaware Water Gap with the Hudson River and the Hudson Valley. And he says at risk of offending somebody, he wouldn't compare them. He just leaves it that there's a lot of similarities between the Hudson and the Delaware, but that the Hudson River had done a better marketing job, as I recall, at the time.
He's a dreamer.
And this one's below the water gap, and we all recognize that bridge. And that picture has been in a lot of postcards. It's not his picture, but everybody's taken that picture. And we see some debris on the left side of the picture there. I don't know if it's rocks or logs or a boat.
It looks like a boat, John. You can see there's an oar in it on the upstream side.
Yeah, I think you're right. Or downstream. Is it upstream? Yeah. And here we got the Broadhead, but I don't know where. But you can drive along 447 and I think see that site, something like that, multiple times. And 96 years ago, that stream has had a lot of help over the years from flooding, strong water flowing through there, moving boulders around. So I think we could find that a picture that represents that very well. It's just somebody has to do it. And here's the Broadhead at play. Another picture of new growth of trees.
John, that looks I might be fantasizing here, but if you look upstream, you can see that there is a cascade up there on the right.
Yes.
And there is only one natural waterfall on all of the Broadhead.
Oh, really?
And that is, I mean, a waterfall of any size.
Right.
And the one upstream above that tree looks like it could be what is these days called the Targa Falls, which is right off of 447.
Mm-hmm.
And it's part of a public preserve now.
I think I've seen a picture of Targa Falls one time, not in his book.
It's a horseshoe falls,
Mm-hmm.
which you wouldn't be able to see the perspective from here. And downstream from there, the water is much flatter now,
Mm-hmm.
which after 100 years you wouldn't be surprised if it had been eroded to a degree.
Right.
But I bring that up because the bedrock to the right is still visible. You can still walk out on the bedrock.
Okay.
To the right, if I'm right about where this
It
is.
sounds like you're volunteering to take the picture.
Oh, I'll take that picture.
All right. Let's do it. Here's a mountain river. I don't know where this is. Once again, I envision that bridge from an alpine mountain down, but I know that wasn't there at the time. But it could be up a little further in the Snow Hill area there, or Clark's Crossing, whatever it's called. It could be in that area. But I don't know. Could be on the West End someplace that I'm not familiar with. This one I found interesting. I don't think, when Amy and I talked about this earlier, I did research on this a year ago, and I believe this is in Stoddardville, and it's a mill, even though he called it Past Castle Walls. And it's actually, I believe, in Luzerne County, right across the county line from Monroe on the Lehigh River there. But it's a very pretty waterway there. And I've never seen this. Amy's been there for a picnic, I think she said, and it was a delightful spot to visit. And here we have Aspen Rapids, nice little birch tree off to the right there, and a barn, I think, on the right. Turbulent water again. It looks like it's got some mud in it, sediment. But I'm kind of fascinated by the, I guess I'm more than fascinated by the photography and the equipment he was using to take these pictures. Young leaves in the Poconos. That's a very calm, flowing stream there, placid. A forest tumult in the Poconos. Once again, we get that motion, the diffusion of the water. So that would have probably been a shutter speed issue. But the leaves are pretty crisp and the trees are very crisp. I don't know where it is. And here's a freshet. I love that word because I never heard of it before I started working on this. And I had to do some research to figure out, well, what's he talking about? And it's, and I guess it's freshet, not net, freshet, but pretty sight there of that water cascading over that ledge, bouncing through the rocks, young growth in the trees again.
But John, again, that cascade in the background looks suspiciously dam-like.
It does have that potential. It could be a mill pond up.
It could be, because you know, the gradient of the bigger creeks like the Broadhead Creek is just not steep enough to create a lot of waterfalls, and yet we know that there were dozens or possibly hundreds of dams along the Broadhead, the Paradise, the Cranberry, the Cherry, all of those creeks, which is why, in large part, why the flood of 55 was so devastating, because all of those dams were taken out and the debris washed down.
We could imagine that was Kintz's Mill Pond.
Okay.
Now we got Bushkill Fall. And I've been to this one multiple times. And there's this one, the photography I think is a little weak on the left side. I don't know if it was the closeness of the rocks and the vegetation, but the focal plane is on the right side where the leaves and the strata in the rock are very clear. And the water seems to be leaning to the right side of the picture as it cascades down there, not a flat drop. But we know where that is. I know where that is. So that is the end of phase 1. And phase 2 is a work in progress. I think now I'm supposed to take questions, Amy.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
All right. Well, that was great. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
We have a couple of questions. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Number 1, where exactly is Paradise Falls?
Don't you dare tell, John.
It's in forbidden territory now. Paradise Falls is at the Paradise Lutheran Association off of 191 in Paradise Valley. And it's private property. And I think you have to be ask permission to venture in there. I think they're willing to let people come visit, but they want to know who's there and why.
Okay. Do you know, did Wallace Nutting travel any further south than Pennsylvania?
Yes, he did. Yes, he did. He went to Virginia. I have not read his Virginia book, and I don't know if he did other states or not. In fact, I think he did. Someplace I saw a list of them. He did Vermont, Massachusetts, Connecticut, New Hampshire, Maine, Pennsylvania Eastern, and he was working on Florida and New York Eastern. But I know he went to Virginia too. It's not in the first edition though. I think you find that in the second or third edition, whatever it was. And this was Old America Company Publishers in Framingham, Massachusetts. And that's the original version. There's 2 other publishers at least that I'm aware of. So that's, yeah, he did go to Virginia, I know that.
Here's another question. We say water bows. Was he referring to rainbows formed by sun shining through the mist?
I don't know, but that's an interesting observation. It could be, or it could be the pattern of the water to him represented a bow kind of flowing down there. I don't know the answer to that. And haven't researched that use of that term. Maybe we could find out if that's a term of art that I'm not familiar with, water bows. I don't know.
We've had a couple questions very similar to this one about were all of the pictures taken the same month or year? If you look through, some of the leaves look a little more full. Some of them look very, very bare. You know, do you think he spent a lot?
That's a good question. I don't know how long he stayed in Pennsylvania, but it must have been for quite a while. But did he just travel up to Monroe County and go back? I think because of the Quaker connection, they may have, folks that he was dealing with, for example, Stokes, may have brought him up here on multiple occasions over a period of time to do his research. That's another point about the Quaker influence. Because he dedicated it to J. Stodbell Stokes, he must have helped him in his research or getting access to places or travel. So it's entirely possible that as part of the Quaker movement to Monroe County, he joined in with them to come up here from time to time. You know, we had, did I mention this? The Buckhill, Pocono Manor, Pocono Preserve, a place up in Wayne or Pike County right across the border, were all founded by the Quakers, as was much of downtown Stroudsburg. So if he was connected, and he was connected with the Quakers, it's possible they came up here on holiday, vacation, or doing his research, and they accompanied him, which would have taken him to many of these places that, because they were big nature lovers. They love to hike, trek, do sightseeing, walking. So it would
That makes sense, though. I would think somebody had to, you know,
that he would make multiple trips, yeah.
Sure. And I wonder, kind of following up for future research, I wonder if there's any mention in the newspaper. You know, they had those social kind of columns that so-and-so was visiting. So I think when you get to phase 2 of your research, it would be interesting to see.
I have looked at newspapers.com and I haven't come up with that, but that doesn't mean it's not there. I just didn't hit it yet.
Right. I if he was as famous beforehand, I would wonder if people knew he was in the area.
Yeah, that's another good resource that I have not explored extensively.
Okay, here's another question. Did Nutting focus solely on landscape photography? Was his paintings landscape also?
That's a tough one for me because as I recall that I've seen only landscape paintings of him, but he was an artist, drawer, drew that furniture, and he has great sketches of furniture that he designed and built in the book. And in certain parts of Eastern Pennsylvania, he focuses on the furniture manufacturing and draws sketches of it. So the part from Monroe County is landscape and water. The rest of the book, though, focuses on furniture and other things.
Okay, next question.
We picked out our choice resource.
All right. Next question. How may one visit Buckhill Falls?
I think you have to ask permission from the Buckhill Association, the office, and then they may grant it. I've not done that.
I have heard that they will grant it if you're, you know, if you call ahead of time, but I attended a Broadhead Watershed Association, had an open house, a partnership with them.
Yes.
And that was a wonderful experience. And they had guides and really able to go and explore the area. So,
well, I think the people there appreciate the resource. They just don't want it abused.
Right. I guess so. So maybe they'll do that again. That would be something very interesting. I think more
right.
people.
And it would be good in the spring, not in a dry period.
This is true. Okay. A few more questions.
Okay.
Have you talked to some of the much older residents to find out about these places?
I think the answer is no. As some of you know, my mother was 99 when she died last year. So I have discussed them with her before she passed away, but she was not a trekker in the forest kind of person. So, yeah, she was friends with the Peters who owned Bushkill Falls when she went to high school with them. But no, I haven't talked to many of the old timers.
Okay, here's a question, or it's not a question, it's from Bonnie Rudovsky. This is not a question, but share that I also have a first edition of this book. I bought it specifically because my first husband's honored family owned and operated Winona Falls from the early 60s until 1988. I've also collected antique postcards and brochures of the falls, which I'd be glad to share with John. Lehman Township now owns the falls.
Lehman Township owns it?
That's what it says right here.
And that's in Pike County, right?
That's correct.
Huh. Okay, I thought it was in Monroe County, Winona Falls. I didn't know that. And Bonnie, thank you.
She also said that Nutting also did portraits of interiors too.
Yes.
And she has seen some, seen some of them, so. Very good. Any other questions? Let me check. Oh, final one.
Okay.
I think this is the final one. Do you have a favorite photo, one that you've connected with?
No, I don't. I do like that one of Delaware Water Gap in the barn, just because of John's book. It intrigues me.
John, you'll have to do another reprint of your book and add that photo to it. Good. Oh, looks like we have another question. This is from Sherry Ann Bush. My family, the Prices, have lived in this area since Indians roamed. Would you like info from some older family members if I can gather some?
Sure. The more the merrier, and pictures.
Sounds good. We can email the Historical Association and we'll get you guys in contact with each other. How does that sound?
That sounds fine.
Good, good. Sonia Cole says that she has a small collection. I raised my hand and have some comments. I don't see anything else from her on that. Here's another question. Would you be willing to do a program on historic hotels?
I have done a program of I don't know where that question is coming from, but I have done a program on Paradise Township hotels. And there were over 55 hotels in Paradise Township.
Wow.
It's a very interesting program. So the answer is yes.
Right. Sounds good. Bonnie also has commented that she thinks the one falls that you cannot identify might be Raymondskill Falls.
Okay.
It's like you got a lot of people thinking here, and
well, send their cards and letters to you, Amy, and you.
Okay, I'll be your secretary and direct all information to John. That's great. I love that. And really, the pictures really are beautiful. And when you think about him traipsing through, and some of those pictures, it's clear that he's standing in the middle of the stream.
Yes, that's right.
When you really think about it, he's clearly standing there, toting those big cameras, getting the perfect angle.
Yeah, and it was a challenge for him because he couldn't see what he was taking a picture, what the picture looked like until he got it developed.
Yeah, I guess, we forget that, don't we? Now in this age where you have an instant gratification with seeing what you took.
Yep, that's right. And you can take hundreds of pictures and delete all but the couple you want.
Mm-hmm. If Sonia, if you want to type in your question, I'm not sure. I don't see anybody else typing. So I think we're good. I think we've answered them.
Well, I hope I was sufficiently entertaining.
I think so. You have a lot of questions and people are thinking about it. Maybe people are inspired to get out and go for a hike and take some of their own photographs.
Right.
Very good. Well, thank you again, John. We truly appreciate you spending your evening with us and all the research that you've done and will be doing.
Uh-oh.
No pressure. Great. Thanks for a great program. Have a good evening, everyone. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.